Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be focusing on caregivers today, and specifically your journey as a caregiver.
That's right.
We'll be using the Caring for Adults with Cognitive and Memory Impairments guide by Family Caregiver Alliance as our roadmap.
That's a great resource.
Yeah, it is. It's packed with practical advice and emotional support for those of you caring for adults facing cognitive challenges.
Right.
And it's relevant no matter where you are in the world.
And you know what strikes me is how universal caregiving is.
Yeah.
It truly transcends cultures and borders. Most people at some point in their lives will either be a caregiver or need care themselves.
So true. The guide really emphasizes that it's okay to acknowledge the tough parts of caregiving.
Yeah.
It can be emotionally draining, physically demanding, and sometimes even a financial strain.
Mm-hmm.
It's not selfish to admit that.
Absolutely. Especially when you're caring for someone with cognitive and memory impairments, the
Right.
challenges can become even more intense.
So let's break that down a bit. Can you explain what we mean by cognitive and memory impairments and how these affect both the person needing care and the caregiver?
Okay, so think of it this way.
Oh.
Cognitive impairments impact the brain's ability to function the way it normally would.
Oh.
This can affect memory, concentration, reasoning skills, and even how someone perceives the world around them.
So things most of us do without thinking twice.
Right.
Like remembering a conversation
Yeah.
or getting dressed
Mhm.
could become real struggles.
Exactly. And for caregivers,
Yeah.
this creates a whole new set of hurdles.
Wow.
Imagine trying to communicate with someone who forgets what you just said,
Oh, God.
or helping someone get dressed when they can't remember how to button their shirt.
Right.
It can be incredibly frustrating for everyone involved.
The guide mentions that these impairments can be caused by a number of things, like Alzheimer's disease, stroke, or Parkinson's disease. These
Yeah.
are serious conditions.
Very serious.
And I can only imagine how tough it must be to cope with them, both for the individual and their caregiver.
It's definitely a unique journey with its own set of challenges.
Yeah.
And along the way, caregivers often encounter what we call challenging behaviors.
Okay.
These can range from communication difficulties and repetitive actions to aggression, paranoia, or even wandering.
Those behaviors sound incredibly stressful to manage. What kind of advice does the guide offer?
Well, it starts with understanding.
Okay.
The guide emphasizes that these behaviors are often rooted in the illness itself, not the person.
Okay.
It's not that they're intentionally trying to be difficult. That's a crucial shift in perspective for caregivers.
So instead of getting frustrated, it's about seeing the behavior as a symptom.
Yes, exactly.
But then how do you actually handle those challenging moments in a practical way?
Communication is key.
Okay.
And the guide goes beyond just suggesting simple language.
Okay.
Think about using visual cues as well.
Okay.
For instance, if you're asking your loved one to put on their shoes,
Yeah.
actually show them the shoes while you're speaking. This multisensory approach can really help them process the information.
Makes sense. Engaging multiple senses can make a big difference.
Exactly. And remember, safety is paramount.
Right.
If you're dealing with behaviors like wandering or aggression,
Hmm.
the guide recommends taking precautions and seeking professional help when needed.
Yeah.
There are strategies and resources available,
All right.
and you don't have to go it alone.
It sounds like knowledge and preparation are crucial.
They are.
Speaking of which, the guide lays out a 10-step roadmap to help caregivers feel more empowered.
Yes.
Should we dive into that?
Absolutely. It's a really valuable framework, and I think we can explore how each step can help you, the listener, navigate your unique caregiving journey with more confidence.
Okay, let's unpack this roadmap. It all starts with step 1, building a foundation.
Right.
What does that actually look like in practice?
Imagine you're a detective gathering clues. This step is all about gathering information about your loved one. Talk to them. Talk to their friends and family. Anyone who can offer insights into their past and how things have been changing.
Okay.
When did memory problems first appear?
Right.
Have there been noticeable shifts in personality or behavior?
So you're creating a timeline,
Yes.
piecing together the story of what's been happening.
Exactly.
But why is this step so important, especially when seeking medical help?
It's like preparing a case file for a doctor. The more complete the picture, the better equipped healthcare professionals will be to make an accurate diagnosis.
Okay.
This leads us to step 2, medical evaluation and diagnosis.
Makes sense. So step 2 is all about getting a professional assessment. What should caregivers keep in mind during this stage?
It's crucial to advocate for a thorough medical exam for your loved one.
Okay.
This isn't just about confirming what you already suspect, but also ruling out other conditions that might be causing similar symptoms.
Got it.
This ensures they receive the most appropriate treatment.
Because sometimes what seems like a cognitive issue could actually be something else entirely,
Right.
right?
Exactly. It could be a side effect of medication,
Wow.
a vitamin deficiency,
Okay.
or even an undiagnosed condition like depression. A proper diagnosis is essential for developing the right care plan.
All right, we've gathered information.
Mhm.
We've got a diagnosis.
Yeah.
What's the next step on this caregiving roadmap?
Step 3 is all about education.
Okay.
It's about empowering yourself with knowledge. Learn as much as you can about the specific condition, different caregiving strategies, and the support systems available. And importantly, don't go through this alone. Include your loved one and their family in the learning process as much as possible.
So knowledge is power, but it's also about sharing that power and making sure everyone feels informed and involved.
Precisely. The more you all understand, the more confident and prepared you'll feel on this journey.
Now, step 4 is identifying needs. What does that involve?
This step takes a practical approach.
Okay.
It's about assessing the level of care required by evaluating your loved one's ability to manage daily tasks, bathing, dressing, eating, handling finances, and so on.
Okay.
It's about getting a clear picture of their specific needs.
So it's about understanding their individual needs.
Yes,
To ensure they receive the right support.
exactly. And once you've identified those needs, you move on to step 5,
Okay.
crafting a care plan.
A care plan.
Yes.
Tell me more about that. What does it involve and how does it help?
Think of a care plan as a personalized roadmap for providing care.
Okay.
It should outline both immediate and long-term needs, taking into account both formal support systems,
Okay.
like healthcare professionals,
Right.
and informal ones like family and friends.
So it's not just about what needs to happen today,
Right.
but also looking ahead and planning for the future.
Absolutely. And the guide stresses that a care plan should be flexible
Okay.
as needs change over time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's also important to consider who can help,
Yeah.
family members, friends, local community resources, and what role they might play.
That's a very practical and collaborative approach,
Yes,
recognizing that you don't have to shoulder everything yourself.
exactly. And speaking of practical matters, step 6 tackles a topic that can sometimes be a bit tricky: finances.
Oh, yes, the elephant in the room.
Right,
It's not always easy to talk about money, especially when it involves someone you care about.
right.
How does the guide approach this sensitive topic?
It acknowledges that sensitivity, but emphasizes the importance of being proactive.
Oh.
It's about understanding your loved one's financial situation and planning for potential future needs, rather than waiting until a crisis hits.
Being prepared can certainly reduce stress down the line.
Yeah.
What specific steps does it recommend?
It encourages gathering all relevant financial documents,
Okay.
creating a budget, and exploring options like long-term care insurance or consulting with a financial advisor.
And then naturally, there are legal considerations.
Yes.
Step 7 focuses on legal preparedness.
That's right. This step highlights the importance of having legal documents in place, like power of attorney and living wills.
So these documents ensure that your loved one's wishes are respected,
Yes,
even if they reach a point where they're no longer able to communicate them.
exactly. And it's crucial to have these conversations early on,
Right.
while your loved one is still able to participate in making these important decisions.
It's about protecting their autonomy and ensuring their voice is heard.
Absolutely. Speaking of protection, step 8 focuses on creating a safe environment.
That sounds especially crucial when someone is dealing with cognitive impairment.
It is.
What kind of things does the guide suggest?
The guide provides a practical home safety checklist,
Okay.
covering things like removing tripping hazards, securing medications, installing grab bars in the bathroom,
Right.
and having emergency contact information easily accessible.
It's about anticipating potential risks and taking steps to prevent accidents and ensure their well-being.
Precisely. Now, step 9 encourages caregivers to connect with others.
That makes a lot of sense. Caregiving can be very isolating. It's so important to have a support system.
Absolutely. The guide recommends looking for support groups,
Okay.
either in person or online.
Mm-hmm.
These communities offer a safe space to connect with other caregivers,
Right.
share experiences, and learn from one another. They can be a real lifeline.
It's that reminder that you're not alone in this, that there are others who understand what you're going through.
Exactly. And finally, we come to step 10.
Okay.
Prioritizing self-care.
Okay.
This might seem obvious, but
Yeah.
it's often the first thing to go when caregivers are feeling overwhelmed.
It's easy to forget about your own needs when you're so focused on caring for someone else.
Absolutely. But the guide emphasizes that self-care isn't a luxury.
Right.
It's essential for both your own well-being and your ability to provide quality care.
It's not selfish. It's about recognizing that you can't pour from an empty cup. What kind of self-care tips does the guide suggest?
It recommends things we all know are important but often neglect. Regular exercise, healthy eating, getting enough sleep, and seeking medical care for yourself when needed.
Basic things that make a world of difference.
Yes, they do.
This 10-step roadmap is incredibly helpful. It provides a clear framework for navigating the complexities of caregiving.
It really does. It's a journey with many ups and downs, but having a plan and knowing where to find support can make a world of difference.
And speaking of support, the guide goes on to discuss a topic that's incredibly important for caregivers, respite care.
Yes.
Can you explain what respite care is and why it's so crucial,
Sure.
especially for those who might be feeling overwhelmed?
Respite care is essentially temporary relief for caregivers.
Okay.
It can range from a few hours to a few weeks
Wow.
and can be provided in your home or at a facility like an adult daycare center.
So it's like a break for the caregiver.
Yes.
A chance to recharge and take care of themselves.
Exactly. Caregiving can lead to burnout, which can negatively impact both the caregiver and the person they're caring for.
Yeah.
Respite care is a valuable tool for preventing that.
It sounds like a vital resource for caregivers who are feeling stretched thin. Are there other resources that caregivers might find helpful regardless of where they live in the world?
There are many organizations like the Family Caregiver Alliance, for example, offer a wealth of information and support online.
Okay.
And we'll be sharing additional resources with you at the end of this deep dive,
Fantastic.
specifically tailored to support caregivers around the world.
This has been such an insightful conversation already.
It really has. And I want to remind our listeners that they're not alone in this journey. Caregiving can be challenging, but it's also deeply rewarding.
Absolutely. And remember, taking care of yourself is just as important as taking care of your loved one.
Well said. In fact, I'd like to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question. What's one small act of self-care that you can commit to this week?
Oh, that's a good one.
It could be something as simple as taking a 20-minute walk, reading a chapter of a book, or calling a friend. Small acts of self-care can make a world of difference.
That's a great reminder. We'll be back with more insights and resources in part 2 of this deep dive. Until then, take good care. Welcome back to our deep dive into supporting caregivers around the world.
It's great to be back. We're picking up where we left off, continuing to explore practical advice and emotional support for caregivers,
Right.
especially those of you caring for adults with cognitive and memory impairments.
We covered so much in the first part, from understanding the unique challenges of these conditions to that valuable 10-step roadmap.
And we touched on respite care, which is a crucial resource for preventing caregiver burnout.
But before we move on, I'd love to delve a bit deeper into those challenging behaviors we talked about earlier.
Okay.
It's one thing to understand they're rooted in the illness, but how can caregivers actually navigate those difficult moments in a practical way?
It's definitely a learning curve, and it takes patience and understanding. The guide offers a range of strategies.
Yeah.
And one that really resonated with me is the idea of creating a calm and sensory-friendly environment.
That sounds interesting. Can you elaborate on that?
Think about the environment your loved one is in. Are there things that might be overstimulating or triggering?
Okay.
Too much noise, clutter, or even strong smells can sometimes escalate challenging behaviors.
I see what you mean.
Right.
It's about being mindful of the sensory input and adjusting the environment to be more soothing.
Exactly. For instance, soft lighting, calming music, and familiar objects can help create a more peaceful atmosphere.
Okay.
Sometimes even simple things like dimming the lights or reducing background noise can make a difference.
So it's about creating a space that feels safe and secure,
Yes.
minimizing those potential triggers.
Hmm.
Are there other practical tips for managing those challenging moments?
The guide offers a lot of practical advice on communication techniques. One that I find helpful is the idea of validation.
Validation. Can you explain what that means in this context?
It's about acknowledging and validating your loved one's feelings, even if their perception of reality might be different from yours.
Okay.
Instead of dismissing their concerns or trying to argue with them, trying to empathize with how they're feeling.
So, for example, if someone with dementia insists they need to go home,
Right.
even though they're already at home,
Exactly.
you wouldn't try to correct them or tell them they're wrong.
Exactly. Instead, you might say something like, It sounds like you're feeling a bit homesick. I understand. Let's make this space feel cozy and comfortable like home. It's about meeting them where they are emotionally.
That's such a compassionate approach. It's about recognizing that their feelings are real, even if the situation isn't.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that caregiver well-being is just as important as the well-being of the person you're caring for.
You're absolutely right. We touched on self-care earlier, but I think it's worth emphasizing that self-care isn't a luxury. It's a necessity for caregivers.
Couldn't agree more. The guide reminds us that neglecting our own needs can lead to burnout.
Yeah.
Which ultimately affects our ability to provide quality care.
What are some ways caregivers can prioritize their own well-being, especially when they're feeling overwhelmed or exhausted?
It's about finding those pockets of time for yourself, even if they're small.
Okay.
It could be taking a few minutes each day for a quiet walk, listening to music, or reading a chapter in a book. It's about doing something that brings you joy and helps you recharge, even if it's just for a few moments.
Those little moments can make a big difference in how we cope with stress.
Absolutely. And, connecting with others is another vital part of self-care.
We talked about support groups earlier, and I know those can be incredibly valuable.
Yes.
But what about for caregivers who might not have access to those types of resources or who prefer a more private approach?
Right.
Are there other ways to connect and find support?
There are. Even if you can't attend a support group, simply reaching out to a trusted friend or family member can make a world of difference. Sharing your experiences, your worries, and your triumphs with someone who cares can be incredibly therapeutic.
That's so true. Even a short phone call or video chat can provide a much-needed emotional boost.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of online communities. There are numerous online forums and groups where caregivers can connect with others from around the world who are facing similar challenges. It can be a wonderful way to share experiences, find resources, and feel less alone.
That's a great point. The internet can really bridge those geographical gaps and connect people who might otherwise feel isolated.
Exactly. And speaking of connecting, I think it's important to remember that caregiving, despite its challenges, can also be a source of profound connection and meaning.
That's a beautiful perspective.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day tasks and forget about the bigger picture.
The guide encourages us to cherish those moments of connection with our loved ones, even amidst the challenges. Whether it's sharing a laugh, reminiscing about old times, or simply holding their hand, those moments can be incredibly precious.
You're right. It's about finding those sparks of joy and connection, even in the midst of difficulty.
Absolutely. And, sometimes those moments come from unexpected places. It might be a shared smile, a gentle touch, or a moment of understanding that transcends words.
Those small gestures can be so powerful. They remind us of the deep connection that exists between caregiver and care receiver, even when cognitive challenges might make communication more difficult.
Absolutely. And, finding ways to express your love and appreciation can also bring joy to both of you.
Right.
It could be writing a heartfelt note, sharing a favorite song, or simply telling them how much they mean to you.
Those expressions of love can create lasting memories and strengthen that bond.
Exactly. And I think that's a good place to pause for now. We've covered so much in this part of our deep dive.
Right.
From practical strategies for managing challenging behaviors to the importance of self-care and finding joy in the midst of caregiving.
It's been a rich and insightful conversation.
It has. And I hope our listeners are feeling encouraged and empowered by the knowledge that they're not alone in this journey.
We'll be back soon with the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore additional resources and practical advice to support caregivers around the world. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the wonders of caregiving.
It's been an incredible journey so far, hasn't it?
It really has. We've explored so much, from the emotional roller coaster of caregiving to practical strategies for creating a supportive and loving environment for those with cognitive and memory impairments.
And we've talked about the universal nature of caregiving,
Right.
acknowledging that these challenges are felt by families all over the world.
Exactly. And, in this final part, I'd love to focus on the idea of finding meaning and purpose in the caregiving journey. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day demands and lose sight of the bigger picture.
That's such an important point. The guide emphasizes that caregiving, despite its challenges, can also be an incredibly meaningful and enriching experience.
It's about finding those moments of grace and connection amidst the difficulties.
Absolutely. And for many caregivers, finding meaning comes from knowing that they're making a real difference in the life of someone they love. It's about providing comfort, support, and a sense of security during a time of vulnerability.
It's about being that unwavering presence, that source of love and stability.
Exactly. And even small acts of kindness can have a profound impact. Something as simple as holding their hand, reading to them, or sharing a favorite song can create a sense of connection and joy for both of you.
Those little moments can be so powerful.
Right.
They remind us of the enduring bond between caregiver and care receiver.
Absolutely. And finding meaning can also come from advocating for your loved one, ensuring their needs are met and their voices heard, even when they might struggle to express themselves.
It's about being their champion, their protector.
Exactly. And, for some caregivers, finding meaning comes from embracing the opportunity for personal growth. Caregiving can be incredibly challenging, but it can also push us to develop new skills, tap into hidden strengths, and deepen our capacity for empathy and compassion.
It's a journey of transformation.
It is.
Both for the caregiver and the care receiver.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that finding meaning is a deeply personal experience. What resonates with one caregiver might not resonate with another.
That's so true. It's about finding what brings you a sense of purpose and fulfillment in your own unique caregiving journey.
Exactly. And, sometimes finding meaning isn't about grand gestures or profound realizations. Sometimes it's about finding those small moments of grace and connection in the midst of the ordinary, everyday moments of caregiving.
Like a shared smile, a moment of laughter, or a simple act of kindness.
Exactly. And, I think it's important to acknowledge that finding meaning doesn't erase the challenges of caregiving. There will still be difficult days, moments of frustration, and feelings of exhaustion.
You're absolutely right. It's not about pretending that caregiving is always easy or joyful.
Yeah.
It's about finding those glimmers of meaning and purpose that can sustain us through the tough times.
Exactly. And, sometimes those moments of meaning come from unexpected places. It might be a moment of shared understanding, a gesture of gratitude from your loved one, or simply the realization that you're making a difference in their life, no matter how small it might seem.
Those moments can be so powerful.
Yeah.
They remind us that even in the midst of difficulty, there is still beauty and meaning to be found.
Absolutely. And, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to emphasize that caregivers are not alone on this journey. There are resources available to support you no matter where you are in the world.
That's such an important reminder.
Online community support groups and organizations like the Family Caregiver Alliance offer a wealth of information and support. And we'll be sure to share links to some of these resources with you after this deep dive.
Fantastic. And, I think it's also important to remember that self-care is not selfish. It's essential for caregivers to prioritize their own well-being so they can continue to provide the best possible care.
Couldn't agree more. Taking care of yourself allows you to be a more present and compassionate caregiver.
Exactly. It's like filling your own cup so you have something to pour from.
That's a perfect analogy. And as we come to the end of our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a message of hope and encouragement.
What a beautiful thought.
Caregiving can be a challenging journey, but it's also an incredibly rewarding one. It's a journey filled with love, compassion, resilience, and often unexpected moments of grace and connection.
You're absolutely right. It's a journey that can transform us in ways we never imagined.
Exactly. And I want to remind all the caregivers out there that you are not alone. You are strong, you are capable, and you are making a difference.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of caregiving. We hope you found it informative, supportive, and empowering.
Until next time, take good care of yourselves and your loved ones.